Good morning, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Bench Talk. I do apologize that this Wednesday morning is not a Wildcat Wednesday. It's just a normal Wednesday. It's a normal hump day for you guys. We did have a podcast recorded. We had a podcast recorded with Cash Carlson from the Varminter magazine. We just had Eric on. Cash is a writer and editor for the Varminter magazine. And Cash happens to be running a very, very, very fun caliber, which I'm a huge fan of, which is the kind of the original OG king of 6mm, which is the 6mm 284. I'm sure there are some guys who are going to say, hey, no, there's some other OG Wildcat 6mm cartridge. The 7mm, or I guess the 6mm Mach 3, if I remember right. It's either Mach 3 or Mach 4, which is an older version of the 7mm Rem Mag, neck down to a 6mm. That may beat out the 6284 on timelines, but anyways, super cool 6mm that Cash has brought back to life, which there are definitely guys who are still varminters who are still out there shooting 6284. I've heard of the podcast I'm thinking of right now is the I want to say West Texas, but I know that's wrong. The Texas Predator Hunting Podcast, TPH podcast. They occasionally talk about guys, right? You know, for night hunting, which a lot of those guys do. Right, they're looking for like max point blank range, max point blank velocity, right? Point and shoot out to a couple hundred yards, and the main podcast host has brought up multiple times that, you know, some of the guys out there in West Texas still shoot the 6.284 because it's such a good long range caliber for varmint hunting. And that's basically what we talked about with Cash and his rifle build and kind of his experiences growing up and how he got into varmint hunting, which is all amazing information. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because most likely I'm going to have to call Cash and rebug him, and we're going to have to refilm the episode. Basically, we sat down, we had an hour and a half conversation, and we had a great episode. Bad part, when I went to edit the recordings, one of the files was corrupted, and it was the recording of Cash's phone call. I record myself, my audio separately, and so that file had been corrupted, so we have no Wildcat Wednesday this morning. I do apologize, and Cash, I apologize for wasting your time. Cool part, along with this whole thing, is that Cash has kind of reignited my interest in the 284 Winchester case. Right, because that's the parent case for the 6.284 is the 284 Winchester, which was originally launched by Winchester in 1963. It was originally offered in the Winchester Model 100, which basically would shoot a 100 to 120 grain, copper-jacketed lead core, soft-nosed lead bullet, and it was shooting it out of a semi-automatic Winchester Model 100 platform. And that was the original intent for that cartridge, which is super funny. I want to say that the trim length for the 284 brass is like 2.1. Maybe it's a little less. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a 40 or 50 thousandths greater. Somewhere in that ballpark range. It's only about 100 thousandths greater than a normal 308 trim to length, which is 2.040 if I remember correctly. And so, funny enough, when I was younger, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, so I was like 20 years old, something like that. My gunsmith I was using at the time, which was Aaron from Tyranny Arms, Aaron had brought up to me that I think someone wanted to do a 284 Winchester build or something like that, and he had vaguely mentioned it to me. About, hey, if you want a really high performance cartridge, 284 Winchester would be really cool, because we talked about a 708 Ackley, and I wanted more performance. And he was like, basically the 708 basically the 284 is basically a short mag, because it is a rebated rim. So it is a very, very fat case for being off of 308 bolt face, but it has a rebated rim, so the rim of the case is much smaller than the actual overall diameter of the cartridge itself. So it's a rebated rim. In theory, it could probably have a Magnum rim for that, or it could have like a Magnum bolt face for the case head. It probably could. I don't know what the actual dimensions are, but it looks like it's big enough. But the rebated rim design is very cool. It gives guys options who are running a standard bolt face the ability to basically run a cartridge that in theory is very, very, very close to having the exact same case capacity as the more modern 6.5 PRC. So when, and basically, right, the only modern people who were shooting the 284 Winchester case, which I've experienced shooting myself, and since we were going to talk about the 6.284, I've had a couple guys actually reach out to me on Instagram recently asking about, hey, are there any good, short action 7mm cartridges that we should consider? And I have mentioned to them the 284 Winchester. So, since we don't have Cash's recording tonight, or this morning, I'm going to basically record an episode, and I'm just going to talk about the 284 Winchester and my personal experiences of it. I built one years ago. I put, I don't know, anywhere between 1,500 rounds to 2,000 rounds through that rifle. And it basically was primarily just target shooting. I really didn't hunt with a rifle. And I'm going to talk about that because I think it's an amazing case. And talking to Cash about his experience with the 6.284 has really reignited my interest in this case. And I think there's probably a pretty good chance later this year or next year I'll have a barrel on order for a 6.284 and potentially another straight 284. I really, really love that case design. It doesn't have, it is a longer case, right? Just like the 308 case. So it is, it's a much more pushy recoil than like snappy recoil, which I really, really appreciate. I kind of know, like a 7 mags recoil is pretty pushy rather than being snappy. 284, I'd put it on that same realm. Cool part, not a lot of guys besides F-class shooters actually shoot the 284 Winchester case. And so for basically the modern 2000s, the 284 Winchester case has basically solely been known in F-class shooting. Right, 1 8 twist, 30-inch long barrels. Guys are shooting 180 grain burgers, and they're shooting for groups at 1,000 yards. And I think, and I may be wrong, right? It depends on how these guys are running their rifles, but kind of a normal load for those 180s out of a 30-inch tube is kind of like 2,850, 2,900 feet a second. And what I will say is that, when I was doing my research on the 284 Winchester, everyone in the United States was basically primarily running it for F-class. There aren't many people running it as a hunting rifle or a hunting cartridge. And all I was reading online was guys are like, if you're going to do a 284 Winchester build, you have to go with a long action. You have to go with a long action because if you're going to basically you're going to try to maximize the case capacity inside the case, you can probably load it at like 3.2 inches overall cartridge length, which would be perfect for like an XM action from Defiance. And right, there are tons of awesome manufacturers that are making XM or medium length action, which is basically your max cartridge overall length is 3.2 inches. There are a bunch of great companies making XM stuff now, right? We have XLR, you have MDT, running their AIC mags for the medium length actions. It's very nice to see people supported in that, right? You can get a medium length action in whatever bolt face you would like. There are some great options for that medium length action out there, but for guys like me at the time when I originally was looking at doing a more of a short action Magnum type of build, and I was looking at 284 Winchester, one of the massive benefits was that it was a standard bolt face, and I thought that I could run it off of a normal 308 length action, which normally, right, your overall cartridge length out of a box mag is probably going to be like 2.90. With AIC mags, right, you're up somewhere around like 2.960, 2.9550, somewhere in that ballpark range for AIC mag length with no binder plate. Some guys would argue that that is lengthening, or trying to get more length out of a normal, just a standard short action, versus going with a true medium length action that would open you up basically an extra 200 thou. It would give you up to 3.2 inches. which is the interior length you're held to with the XM AIC mags. Maybe you get a little more if you're using a Wyatt's bottom metal, but that's not something I've done personally. So basically, I'm at this point in my journey where I'm gonna do this 284 Winchester build. I know nothing about the case. I went and got a handful of 6.5 by 284 Norma brass. The brand was Lapua, but it was the 6.5 by 284 Norma. Kind of, I guess, more backstory on the 284 case. It is one of the only calibers where the Wildcat cartridge basically became more popular than the parent cartridge. So when it came out in 1963, right, it was at the time targeted towards hunters, and immediately guys started wildcatting it. So they started wildcatting it from a 22 284, 6 284, 25 284, 27 by 284, 308 by 284, 375 by 284, which is super impressive. So basically all the way from 22 caliber all the way up to 375 on the 284 case. Is there an improved version of this case? Yes, it's called the Sheehan. And it's, if I remember correctly, it's Shehane, Sheehan or Shehane, however you want to pronounce it. And basically, you can find the improved cartridge for the Wildcats, like the 6.284 Shehane, the 284 Shehane, the 22 284 or 25 284 Shehane. Now, granted, you don't get a huge improvement in case capacity with the Shehane. I believe it does bump the shoulder up to a 40-degree shoulder, so you gain a little bit of case capacity because naturally, basically, the 284 Winchester case, basically straight-walled. It is basically a straight-walled case with a 35-degree shoulder. And so you get 66 grains of H2O capacity, right, give or take probably a couple grains either direction, depending on which manufacturer you're using for brass primarily. You can get Norma, Lapua, Peterson, and I want to say that sorry, for brass manufacturers you're looking at Lapua, and Lapua is going to be making straight 284 brass or the 6.5 by 284 brass. And funny enough, before I go any further, I guess the 6.5 by 284 was actually probably one of the most notable Wildcats off of the 284 Winchester case. It was liked so much in Europe that Norma actually grabbed the case and had it semi-spec'd. So that's why you end up with the 6.5 by 284 Norma. Granted, it is just a 6.5 by 284 Winchester that Norma went and got semi-spec'd. So you have Norma brass, you have Lapua brass, you have Peterson brass, and I believe that's it. From my understanding, there was a small stint where Lapua stopped making 6.5 by 284 and 284 Winchester brass, so Peterson was the only ones, which that was a huge negative, only having one brass manufacturer. I'm a huge proponent, or I guess a supporter of Lapua brass. I think Lapua brass is great, and specifically their 284 Winchester brass is amazing. So I'm a young kid. I want this 7mm. I want something that's going to start pumping stuff up at higher velocities, bigger bullets, better BC, longer distance shooting, stuff like that. So basically, I started doing a ton of research on the 284 Winchester case, and what I find is that in Eastern Europe, specifically New Zealand, a lot of these guys are buying 708s by Tikka. And what I didn't know and I learned, right, is that Tikkas are technically all the exact same action length. They basically just have a bolt stop that stops the bolt throw from, basically, if you're running a short action cartridge, it stops your bolt throw very short, right, for like a 6.5 Creedmoor case, 308 case. If you're running like a long action Magnum, like a 7 mag, you have the extended bolt stop, so your bolt can go further backwards, right, basically giving you the actual full length of pull for a long action cartridge versus the more shallow throw that they try to do with a short action cartridge, but it's just swapping on a bolt stop. So guys are buying these 708s, and they're having them reamed out to 284. They're swapping out the bolt stops to the long action bolt stop, and then they're running these things in a factory rechambered Tikka at 3.2 inches, and they're running 162 grain ELDMs. They're chopping the barrels down to 18 inches, and they're running 162 grain ELDMs with reloader 17 at 2,900 feet a second. And they call them the Super Pig. Loved the name. So the 284 Win Super Pig. Google it. It's super fun. There's like vaguely some videos on it. There's a handful of conversations in different forums online. That's kind of where you'll read the most about the Super Pig. And right, these guys in New Zealand, they are mountain hunting motherfuckers. Like they are on some of the steepest, craziest shit. And right, these guys are going and they're culling goats. They're shooting red deer or stags. They're shooting hogs. And a lot of it's high angle shots. So these guys want a packable rifle and they want something with really good BC for long range shooting. And that 162 grain ELDM by Hornady has a G1 BC of 0.67. It has a very, very sharp ogive. And so it's kind of a short, fat bullet with a very, very aggressive ogive at the front. But it's very sharp and abrupt, so you can seat that bullet into the neck of the case, and basically your boat tail junction's kind of like right at the shoulder body junction of the case. And so, I mean, you're running anywhere between 48 grains of H4350 all the way up to 52, 53 and a half grains of H4350 is kind of a standard load. Anywhere in that range for the 160 grain class bullets. Right, you need to start low for your rifle. For me, I normally started around 47, 48 grains of H4350, and I just slowly increase half a grain and monitor pressures, monitor velocity. Out of a 24-inch barrel, a 1 8.5 twist, I was running 162 grain ELDMs with H4350 and 6.5 by 284 Norma Lapua brand brass that was just necked up. And the 162 grain ELDMs, and I was running them, depending on the load, anywhere between 2,900 and 2,950, and that was at the overall cartridge length of 2.950. And so basically what I did was I had a short action Howa 1500. I had sent it off to Aaron at the time, and Aaron blueprinted it. I later had the action sent off to a completely separate gunsmith, had them bush the bolt, bush the firing pin, had them cut off the bolt knob and thread on a tactical bolt knob, which was great. And then when I was looking for getting a 284 Winchester barrel, I particularly love Schillen barrels. I really, really like them. I've had great luck with Schillen barrels. Well, Schillen, you can go and order pre-fit barrels from them. They call them Alternut. They're basically a Remage barrel. They don't use a Savage small shank barrel nut. They use a Savage large shank barrel nut. So basically it'll be your threads going into your receiver, and then the threads step up to the exact same size as the Savage large shank barrel nut, and then that's how you use that barrel nut system to headspace that barrel to your receiver, which is great. And so I've had good luck with those barrels. You can get them in select match, which I always do. They run $500 or $600 depending on what dimensions you get them in. Again, I got their heavy contour originally. It was stainless select match. I think it was a 1 8.5 twist barrel, and I had it threaded 5/8 by 24 and chopped off at 24 inches. That barrel was super, super good to me. And the 284 Winchester case, honestly, very easy to load for. I remember at the time, this was kind of like, partway through the pandemic, and so I had found accurate H4350, which if you don't know and you've never played around with accurate 4350, it is a very bulky ass powder. So I could only fit in enough accurate 4350 into a 284 Winchester case at 2.950 overall cartridge length. I could only fit in enough accurate 4350 to get 162s at 2850. So I wasn't maxing out on pressure. I was maxing out on case capacity. Just luckily, using reloader 17, reloader 15.5, H4350. H4350 was the big winner. For me, I loved it. I used reloader 26 a little bit, and the reloader 26 in that case got those things screaming. On a cold morning out in Nevada, I was testing it. I remember I had 162s at 3,100 feet a second with reloader 26 out of a 24-inch barrel. I'm sure that I was at the top end of velocities, top end of pressures, but it is a very, very, very capable cartridge. I mean, at 2900, 2950 with 162 grain ELDM, like, you're 100% knocking on the velocity of a 7 mag. Now, granted, right, 7 mag, 7 PRC, you're looking at, probably 180s in that ballpark of 2,900 to 3,000 feet a second, depending on how fast your barrel is. Most 7 mags and 7 PRCs, right, are going to do 3,000 feet a second, with the 162s kind of all day long. So I will not say that the 284 is like a true 7mm rim mag, 7 PRC competitor, but what I will say is that it's getting pretty damn close. It's doing a really good job, especially for, someone like me, which recently, right, I'm going with a completely new rifle that I want to start shooting in matches, which, right, the 7 Swick by Sherman is now out on the market. It's been on the market for probably a year, maybe a little longer. I haven't been super paying attention, but they announced it publicly, at least within the past year to 18 months, which is the 7 Swick. So, right, it's a 7mm off of the 6.5 by 47 Lapua case. Right, they actually improved the 6.5 by 47 Lapua case. They necked it up to 7mm, put 190 grain Berger in it, and they're shooting those at like 2,600 feet a second. So to basically come up with my own version of that, I did a 708 Ackley improved, which I have both rifles here at the house. They're put together. I have basically a 30-pound 708 Ackley improved, which I'm shooting 180s at 180 grain ELDMs at like 2,700 feet a second, out of my 26-inch 1 and 8 twist, and then I have a 24-inch 1 and 8.5 twist that I will be using for basically some of the local NRL hunter matches, but primarily that's going to be my hunting rifle. And for that, I'm going to be shooting the 143 grain Maguire Ballistics Copper Rose. It's got really close to like a 0.6 G1 BC. I think it's a 0.58. But anyways, they're monolithic copper bullets. They're pretty slick. We're hoping I'll have them in the range between 3,100 to 3,200 feet a second out of that 708 Ackley. And the big reason why that I went with the 708 Ackley over just going 284 was just overall basis of it is much easier to run the 708 Ackley out of a AIC mag versus the 284 Winchester. So at the time, right, how a 1500 short action, when you order the barrel from Schillen, cool part, you can actually order their 284 Winchester with a 0 free bore, and then you send them in a dummy round, and they can basically throat it to the dummy round. So I was dumb, didn't understand that at the time, so I did not do that. So I was just like, yeah, just chamber my barrel up with whatever the normal free bore is for your guys' 284 Winchester reamer. And so they threaded it, and I think they chambered it, and I think with my 162 grain ELDM, I think my jam point was like 3.030. So 3 inches and 30 thousandths was my jam, and I was loading him at 2.950. So I had like 80 thousandths a jump. Not a huge deal, and it shot great. I had an amazing time with that rifle. I killed some coyotes with it. Never took it pig hunting, but I used that rifle as a way of basically my version of a 308. I used it to get out and just go target shoot. I shot the shit out of that rifle. I took my first long range shooting course with Mark Zorick, West Coast Long Range. My first course I did with Mark, I think in like 2022 or 2023, that was the exact rifle I brought. I brought a 284 Winchester on a short action, and that load that I was shooting was one of the ones with accurate 4350, so it was like I was shooting 162s at 2850 out of a 24-inch barrel, and my ES and standard deviation was fucking everywhere. I think my extreme spread was like 50 or 60, because Mark chronographed it when I was there, and Mark thought it was hilarious. He was like, kind of like, what the fuck are you doing showing up with this rifle with this load? And I'll be honest, I had zero problems making impacts on targets at 750 and in. It got a little hairy past that, but I mean, even Mark seemed pretty surprised with how shitty the ammunition was for that rifle. right? Not accuracy-wise. I mean, it's still printed easily under an inch at 100 yards, but right, with that extreme spread and standard deviation, right, from everything that we've been told, you're probably not going to be good. You're probably, going to be missing targets at 500, 600, 700 yards, right, because the difference in velocity is going to translate to a difference in vertical spread. But I did fine. Again, up until about, 750 in that range, that's kind of where it was like, right, one shot would be high, next shot would be low, and right, I'm fighting against the extreme spread at that point. But within that, man, that gun hammered. I shot the shit out of it. I ended up ordering a carbon 6 carbon fiber 284 Winchester pre-fit barrel for that exact rifle. Now, granted, I tried to call Carbon 6 and ask them, like, hey, what 284 Winchester reamer do you guys have? Because if they are using an F-class style reamer, it is going to put you where your jam point is 3.2 inches. And so I think I hit up Carbon 6, and I think they told me they didn't completely know what the free bar was on the reamer they were using. So I took a chance, ordered a barrel. Barrel came back. Barrel was throated for basically a long action. It was throated for 3.2 inches was my jam point. And unfortunately, I ended up grabbing that barrel. I grabbed my original 284 Winchester barrel, and I sold it to a guy back east. And, I talked with him kind of all about my reloading stuff, what my experiences were with the case. And he bought that stainless steel barrel from Schillen that I originally had, which, I don't know, had 1,500 to 2,000 rounds on it, which the barrel wear on it looked amazing. It barely had any throat erosion at all, which, again, super cool that the barrel life was so well in that cartridge. And for that, original stainless steel barrel, right, I was taking it out and shooting the shit out of it. Funny enough, the American Rifle Company AIC mags, the ones that are basically dual stack and feed into a single feed, those ones actually handled the 284 Winchester case quite well, and you could basically fit, I want to say, 8 or 9 rounds of 284 in the ARC mags. So that's primarily what I ran. I still have like 3 or 4 of their mags sitting in my safe because that's all I used it for was 284 Winchester. Yeah, that was a really fun time for me for doing that. But I grabbed, basically, I wasn't super happy that I had this barrel that was throated for basically what I would consider a long action. Didn't even want to try to shoot it or mess with it. I grabbed that original stainless steel barrel. I grabbed all the brass that I had, which I had probably 400 or 500 pieces of brass, and that brand new carbon fiber barrel, and I sold it all. Sold all my 7mm bullets. And I was basically just like dead set I was getting out of the 7mm game. And then I ended up on a completely separate kick where I ended up building a 7 by 6.5 PRC, which was a shit show. I got my original barrel, did not shoot well. It was basically I got bad. It was a badly rifled barrel. The manufacturer gave me a new barrel blank, which was very nice. Great customer service, and that was Proof Research, which I do really, really appreciate them doing that. And they're a great company to work with. But basically, I ended up actually sending off my reamer and headspace gauges to Schillen, because Schillen, I was going to have them spin me up a pre-fit for a 7 by 6.5 PRC with all my own stuff. And basically, right, that reamer and set ended up getting shipped to like a random ass house in Houston. And basically, I never got notified by the post office. 60 days passed, which is basically the time you can report something missing. It timed out. I lost out on $300 or $400 worth of reamers and headspace gauges. And then I was completely out of the 7mm game. And I was super, super disappointed. And I'll be honest, I had some regret there. I was like, man, I never should have gotten rid of that 284 Winchester. I really, really, really liked that caliber. There are just some unfortunate things, right? It's kind of unique with having a standard bolt face and kind of a short action cartridge, or you can make it work in a short action. It's a great cartridge. I went and basically redid I had one of my dad's old rifles rebarreled. It was a Winchester Model 70, and it was a post 64. It was one he bought when he was 12 years old. My dad's like 67 right now. So he bought that thing 50 plus years ago, And I had it rebarreled with a Proof Sendero 1 and 8.5 twist barrel, and it was originally in 7 mag, and so we had it put back in 7 mag. But getting ready to rechamber that thing for the 7 mag barrel, I almost went and tried to find a standard bolt face bolt to do a long action 284 Winchester on that rifle, and I thought that would be so badass. Because you'd get very, very similar performance, you'd get less recoil. It'd be a really fun cartridge. So, 284 Winchester is a dying cartridge, but is still very, very, very relevant in this day and age. I think it is so fun. Even funny enough, I just saw like yesterday, one of the guys who works for Unknown Munitions had them build him a 25 by 284, and he did it on a long action, and he had it all done up super nice. It was in an XLR 4.0 magnesium element 4.0 magnesium chassis. Super, super nice looking rifle, and I was messaging him back and forth. We were bullshitting, and he was running a 20-inch barrel, 1 and 7 twist, 25 284, and he was looking at shooting the 135 or 133 grain class bullets at like 3,000 feet a second out of that rifle, which is super cool, right? 25 Creedmoor is not going to give you that velocity. Going 284, you're absolutely going to get it. And then like when the 257 caliber bullets kind of took over, or kind of got like reignited with heavier for caliber bullets a few years ago, when Blackjack was still around and Sierra was making the 131 grain Blackjacks for them, they were also a huge proponent of the 284 case, and they basically got guys to start rebuilding 25 by 284s due to the fact that right at that time they were the primary ones that were building these, or having built these high BC 25 cal bullets. And because I actually called them and chatted with them a bit, and if you want max velocity, go with the 25 by 284 and blah blah blah, and super cool cartridge design, super cool idea. And right, I get into this whole thing, and it goes back to Cash's build. Cash built his 6.284, and he built it off of a short action. So funny enough, when I ordered my original 284 Winchester barrel from Schillen, I actually had on order with them a 6mm 284. And basically, right, like when you place an order with Schillen, it's going to be 5 or 6 months till you get a barrel. And so basically, I had placed an order for a 284 Winchester barrel. I had placed an order for a 24-inch 6.284 barrel. And I was reading, tons of shit online, and I got super nervous that I was going to run out of length for the 6mm 284. So I ended up phoning Schillen back up and asked them to swap that barrel to a 243 Ackley, which, right, I shoot the 243 Ackley to this day, 9 years later. And I've never looked back. So funny enough, I had headspace gauges, I had brass, I had dies, I had everything. And I think I actually had some rounds loaded up for the 6.284, and I was basically just waiting for the barrel to show up. And so I had a set of Redding full-length sizing dies, and I can't remember if they were Type S dies with the replaceable the neck bushing, or if it was just the normal full-length sizing die. I can't remember which one it was. But I had these dies for years and years and years, and basically 2 years ago, Cash hit me up and was like, hey man, I remember like ages ago you were thinking about doing a 6.284. You never did it. Like, any chance you still have any of your reloading stuff? And I said, yeah, in fact, I have these 6.284 dies. Cash bought the dies for me, and then those are the dies that he's currently using for his 6.284. So for me, super, super, super cool, like kind of chain of events where, right, I was going to do a rifle cartridge, didn't decide to do it. And now a buddy, someone who I bullshit with a lot about reloading and shooting and hunting stuff, is now doing one of these builds. And cool enough, something that runs me down memory lane is something that is in his everyday use for reloading for this cartridge. And so I'm pretty sure Cash for his build is using Peterson brass primarily, and he's necking it down. Cash is playing around with everything from 70, 80 grain bullets all the way up to 105 burgers. And he's running them at a max cartridge length of 2.950. For guys who are really interested, just short action, 26-inch barrel, 1 in 8 twist. Cash only has 100 or 150 rounds on the barrel, and so he's still doing testing, right? Still breaking in brass, stuff like that, and just on a kind of a whim load. And Cash, right, uses quick loads to basically check pressures on everything. He actually checks his own H2O capacity for his cases, right? Trying to get basically as accurate information as he can on quick loads. Cash has basically a very mild load worked up right now with the 105 burgers, where he's shooting those at 33.25, which is great. And right, guys who are running the 6 PRCs right now, which is the latest and greatest, right, Wildcat or king of the 6mm, which I also built a 6 PRC earlier, maybe last year or the year before. Right, guys are pushing 105s at like 3,500 feet a second. Which I have no doubt Cash can get very close to, but Cash isn't going to deal with any of the issues that those guys are dealing with. So the 6 PRC, I had a barrel spun up. I won't say by who, but I had a barrel spun up for one of my Mac Brothers actions. It was a 24-inch barrel, not threaded. I believe it was a 1 in 7.5 twist barrel. It was a stainless steel proof barrel. Medium Palma, if I remember correctly, and I had it chambered up, and I, had I believe it was Peterson's 6.5 PRC brass, necked it up to 7mm, and it was just, that's what it was. Or sorry, my bad, necked it down to 6mm. Man, there's a lot of recoil behind that 6 PRC case, and that was something I did not like. I like being able to shoot comfortably, see impacts, right? My 243 Ackley I shoot everything with, right? We're bored driving around ranches. I'll shoot crows out of trees at long distance. I'll shoot jackrabbits. I'll kind of shoot anything, including rocks. I don't care. We can get bored and start shooting long range rocks. The 6 PRC was definitely noticeably with recoil was on that Magnum spectrum, which, it was a 14 pound rifle. And I mean, it had significant recoil to the point I was like, I'm good. I don't want to sit here and just plink with this thing. I don't. And I also knew that it had significant barrel wear. So, doing tons of load development with it wasn't super fun. So I put, 300 or 400 rounds on that barrel, just through load development, and nothing that was actually crazy high velocities. Like, I think for fireforming brass, I was fireforming brass at like 3,200 feet a second, with 105s, which was a very mild load. But yeah, I pulled that barrel off and sold it to a guy, and never heard anything since. I'm guessing he's happy with it. But yeah, it just wasn't a caliber for me. What I will say though is, Cash loves that 6.284, and he loves it so much that I'm really thinking about getting another barrel for it. And it's an enjoyable cartridge to shoot that Cash's son has actually basically taken over the rifle. And that was another very fun story that we got into, right? Cash talks about kind of the pivotal moments for himself getting into varmint hunting, some of the very important things in his childhood, like there was a very specific rifle his father passed down to him, which got him into varmint hunting. And he grew up in Idaho next to the Snake River. And so basically rock chuck shooting, coyote shooting was a big thing for him. He grew up in a farming family. And basically, right, the time of the year for harvest was during big game season. So that wasn't a thing for him. So for, right, shits and giggles, fun, also crop protection, right, him and his family primarily did varmint hunting along with coyote hunting in the winter or in the spring. And right, because they weren't hunting during harvest. So Cash kind of goes over all that stuff, and then right, he gets to kind of go full circle at the end of the podcast, and he gives us kind of a couple stories about him and his son, who's now 14, and how he's getting him into varmint hunting, and he's got the full bug, and he's going out with Cash and shooting, and the 6.284 is one of his favorite rifles to shoot. Which, Cash said that he's taken multiple things at 500 yards, from badgers to coyotes, which it's super, super cool to hear that, right? Getting kids into the outdoors is great. Funny enough, I told Cash this during the podcast. I'm still so sad that episode didn't save correctly. But, funny enough, I've talked with Cash, and I always talk with people I'm going to do podcasts with prior to the podcast. And so me and Cash were talking, he's telling me about everything that was going on with his son. And within a couple days of that conversation, my son turned 6 years old, and I was able to take him out to a buddy's ranch, which I really, really appreciate him allowing us to go out there because it meant a lot to my son. And basically, right, taking a 6-year-old out, right, the main premise is just trying to go have fun. This is, my son's gone out with us, elk hunting, trying to go out, and when we don't have a tag, we'll go out in Nevada kind of in December, November, and, look for deer, stuff like that, go start a fire, go brew some, coffee for the adults, some hot chocolate for the kids, and we sit there behind glass and try to pick out some deer in an area that we are hopefully going to pull a tag at some point. And, it's always fun, but he was never in a situation where, like, Dad's actually hunting. And so, we went to the ranch, and Dad wasn't actually hunting, but, he thought we were. And so, right, he had his binoculars. Funny enough, I was at my dad's recently, and I found an old pair of 10x42 Steiners that were an older pair that I used to have as a child. And so, my son got those. He had those when we went hunting out here in California. And, we're pulling up to the ranch. We get to the gate. He has his binoculars, right? We're all throwing on our shit, grabbing rifles and stuff. And, we pull in the gate, and within, I don't know, a quarter mile of the gate, there's a herd of like 30 pigs off the road. So he got to see some pigs, which was super cool. Neither me or my buddy wanted to fuck with shooting a pig, so we held off on that. We had in mind we wanted to go target shoot. And so, Jackson got to see the pigs. I think the little lead boar that was kind of the younger boar leading the group was maybe about 200 pounds. And a lot of, smaller sows kind of in that 100-pound range. Still really cool to see. They were hanging out under some oak trees. And, we're driving through. They take off. My son got to see that, which was cool, right? The pig's taking off through the prairie, dust flying up. He's trying to watch them through binoculars. And, also, they were calving at that time, so he got to see a bunch of fresh calves get dropped, which is great. Right, it's super pretty. It's a spring, right? We have like neon green grass everywhere. There's the ranch we're on has a couple different types of cattle. I can't remember what the names are, but basically Black Angus and then the white cows. I can't remember what the name of those are, but Jackson was obsessed with it. At one point, we pulled over to glass some stuff up. We were trying to spot some pigs. And we were next to basically a heifer and her calf, and Jackson just couldn't get over how adorable these calves are. I mean, you just want to scoop them up and take them home as a puppy. So he thought that was super cool. I had my 223 Ackley with me at the time, and so my buddy was shooting squirrels out of the truck with that. Jackson was watching them blow up, which he literally, like, we pull up at one point. I think we had some ground squirrels at like 50 yards. My buddy, shoots a couple of them, and Jackson just like bails out of the truck with his iPad. He's just sprinting out there, wants to go see these squirrels that just got turned inside out at 50 yards. And he thought that was super cool. He was, telling Mom, "Oh, we're gonna see a coyote, and I'm gonna pew it." And my buddy luckily brought a little Chipmunk 22 for my son, so my son got to mess around with that a little bit. And we had a good day barbecuing, had some hamburgers, and took a quick drive around the ranch, and ended up actually seeing a coyote zipping through one of the cattle fields at like 500 yards. And kind of a cool note for myself, recently got some Revic binos that are the range finding ones. They do actually give you your dope. I haven't actually inputted my rifle's, ballistic calculator data into their software, so I don't get that. But basically, right, bring up the binos, range. It's going to spit out a range for you, and right, you can go from there. And so basically, I was just testing the binos when we were out at the ranch, and I had at the time, one of my it's my last Howa 1500 that I have, and it's has a Chillin 22-inch 1-in-8 twist 243 Ackley barrel on it. I have it sitting in an XLR Element 4.0 magnesium chassis with a folder, and then I'm running the basically it's the like triple pull PRS stuff, Dauntless bipod. which I really, really like. It comes in at like 29 ounces, but it's cheaper, like on sale. They're $350. A fantastic bipod. Love it. So basically, I hopped out of the truck, ranged it at 460 when it first stopped. I knew my dope for 500, so I dialed for 5. Right, I've practiced proning out with this bipod before. I'm familiar with what position. So basically, I ranged, stepped out of the truck, proned out on the ground, and had a shot off within 60 seconds. And dumped the coyote, ran out in the field, grabbed it, brought it back. My son was all about it. He was so happy. Got to come home and tell Mama that we pewed a coyote. And we ended up going out doing some burgers, and then we headed out from there. And it was great. Was it harder than us going out and doing something on our own? Yeah, totally. Because you're right, you're trying to keep a 6-year-old entertained, but that was priceless for me. And I told Cash that story when we were on the podcast, and I told him that the end goal is that when my son is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, like he's going through with his son right now, I hope that I have done a good job as a father introducing my son to the outdoors like Cash has, and I hope that my son has as much love for the outdoors and shooting and hunting as I do. Right? That's every father's dream. If I can share the outdoors and have a hunting partner that's my son or my daughter, and go out and enjoy my hobbies with them, that's a huge thing. And I think that every parent, every sister, brother, father, daughter, aunt, uncle, I think that everyone, if you get the opportunity to take a kid out into the outdoors and get them into shooting and the recreational space, I think you should. I think it's a huge outlet for kids that they can easily focus on, because it's something that they can find entertaining very easily, right? Kids like doing things that they find fun, just like adults do, right? We don't like doing shit that's actually hard work. So kids will gravitate normally towards extracurricular activities that you're putting in front of them versus schoolwork and stuff like that, which everyone needs a healthy outlet. So, I mean, I can tell you when I was in college and I was going through some shit, that was kind of when I got into kind of big, hot, and heavy into hunting. And I was very, very lucky that that was my outlet at the time versus drinking and partying and everything else. I didn't want that stuff, man. I was leaving my college dorm or my college apartment, early in the morning, late at night to, make a last minute drive to Nevada because someone had a muzzleloader tag, and I was going to go spend the night in the bed of my pickup in a BLM parking lot trying to get, mule deer, or going coyote hunting up in Mendocino, or going pig hunting up in Mendocino. That was a huge time for me, and I was just lucky that I kind of stumbled into it versus having someone really get me into it. My dad had me hunting as a child, but it wasn't something I did a ton of due to the fact that I had collegiate sports during normal big game season. So varminting and coyote hunting and stuff was kind of my primary way into it, and I just, when I got more time on my hands when I was older as an adult, 18, 19 years old in college, that's kind of when it took off with me making sure that I could actually have a lot of time to go hunting. But anyways, I look forward to us having an actual Wildcat Wednesday, maybe next week or the following, whenever Cash is available, so we can actually redo this podcast over the 6mm 284. But I hope this gives you a better reference on the 284 Winchester case, what you can do with it in a modern setting, right? It is a very, very valid cartridge still if you are going to run it in a short action. I would not be fearful of it. And honestly, as a cheaper option and something where you can customize it very easily, I am a huge proponent of those Schillen alternate barrels. I know some guys might not like it. They might not think they're accurate. I run those as 243 Ackley barrels. I run those as 6GT barrels. I run those as 284 Winchester barrels. I've never had any issues getting accuracy. I mean, my 243 Winchester barrels are shoot quarter-inch groups. My 284 at the time, and granted, I was not at my peak of me getting into reloading and accuracy and all that stuff, but I mean, that thing shot half-inch groups all day long. I would never be fearful about getting a pre-fit barrel. And if you are interested in doing a short-action 284 Winchester, having the option to order it through Shillin and order it with a 0 free bore and send in whatever dummy round you want, and they'll throw it directly to that, is a huge benefit, right? Because if you are going to run, 162 grain ELDMs and you throwed it for 2.950, you can then load it in an AIC mag at 2.930, give yourself 20 thousandths a jump, and you're going to get a lot of room to actually play with the jam point and stuff like that. You're not going to just be loading at mag length and kind of just dealing with whatever your freebore is. So if you guys have any questions about it, anything like that, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. I'm an open book. And then also, it's very old. Not super old. It's probably 3 or 4 years old now, but I have a video of that original rifle that I put on YouTube. Now, granted, it's an older video. This is not peak performance for old Joe. So take it easy. If you guys watch the video, leave me a comment saying, hey, watched it, liked it, hated it, you look stupid, whatever you guys want. But any comment helps the algorithm. And please, if you guys enjoy this stuff, take the time to subscribe, give us a thumbs up. If you guys want to leave comments or reviews on Spotify or Apple Podcast or YouTube, please feel free. Tell me if you think if I look dumb or if I'm good host, whatever you guys think. It does help the algorithm, helps more information get out there to other people. And all we're trying to do is just share information with people. That is it. So if I could recommend something, there's been a lot of stuff going on recently in my personal life. Grab your family, give them a hug, remind them that you love them, because our days are numbered, and unfortunately, you do not know when your clock is up. So enjoy every moment with your family. Enjoy every moment you guys get in the outdoors. Take every single breath as a gift from God, and I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, and happy Wednesday.